final video on enrichment, we will summarise what we've said so far and see where it fits into the big picture of utterance interpretation, how we go about completely working out what someone is trying to communicate to us. Recall what we said so far. Typically, we do not say everything we mean. Rather, we under-encode, and we have to leave it to the hearers to enrich what we have said. We've also talked about 4 categories of enrichment: ambiguity, vagueness, ellipsis, and reference. Let's go back to our original example from the Churchtown Parish magazine and the bowl labelled "For the Sick." Which of these enrichment processes might someone use to work out what is being communicated here? So here are the words "for the sick." But first of all, there's a potential ambiguity. The word sick in British English could refer to vomit or to an ill person, but because of the use of the definite article "the sick" and the context, they help our brains to work out very quickly that it's ill people that are intended. So we've enriched the ambiguity. We also need to enrich the ellipsis. What is for the sick people? Presumably the point is something like, this bowl is for the sick. Here's our bowl for the sick, remember? Again, our minds very quickly use the context to enrich this aspect. Perhaps, though, there is also something here that requires an enrichment of reference. What is actually for the sick? It's not the bowl itself, but the contents of the bowl. This might be better explained by talking about metonymy, but we're going to come to that later on. If we've got this far, we've come a long way in working out what the person who wrote this label was trying to say. And note that our minds do it almost instantaneously, because the context enables us to work all this out. To use relevance theory terminology, we might say the bowl is very manifest in the cognitive environment of the reader. There is no vomit manifest, thankfully. And there are knowledge frames derived from our general life experience that tell us you don't give bowls to sick people, you give them other things. So it should be very easy for us to enrich these aspects correctly. So let's look at the story so far and put this in context to describe more fully the process we go through in inferring meaning from communication. We've spent most of our time focusing on written examples. For spoken utterances, there's an extra process that needs to take place as well as enrichment. When we hear something, we need to work out what the distinct words are if we're going to be able to enrich them. In terms of the model used by relevance theory, we might say the first step is to decode the sounds into words and establish the logical form. As an example, let's imagine a situation where my family are visiting Buckingham Palace and bump into a friend who asks them where I am. To which my wife replies, "Phil's not here." The first step is to decode this sound into words and arrive at the logical form, "Phil is not here." This isn't actually as simple as you might think. Just watch a TV program with simultaneous subtitles and you'll see the difficulties. Now we've sorted out the logical form, the friend enriches the utterance to assign reference correctly. Who is Phil? It's Dr. Phil King. Where is here? It's at Buckingham Palace. At this point, we might say that the utterance has been enriched to the form of a proposition. Phil King is not at Buckingham Palace. However, this is not usually the end of the story when trying to work out what somebody is trying to communicate. The proposition is not enough. Let's remember our sentence from the Churchtown Parish magazine. If the reader has reached the proposition, the contents of the bowl are for the sick people, has she completely understood the point of the label? Surely not. If the reader is feeling a little bit ill herself, and so takes some of the contents of the bowl, is that what the writer of the sign was expecting? Presumably the writer of the sign was intending to communicate, please put something into this bowl that will be given to the sick. Even more specifically, it seems that the writer was intending to communicate you should put money into the bowl to be given to the sick, rather than food or clothes, for example. Hence the point of this clarification about monetary donations, we assume. These aspects of communication go beyond the propositional form of the utterance. For example, understanding that a request is being made and understanding what requested actually is. These are at the level of what relevance theory talks about as explicatures and implicatures of the utterance. So let's try to develop a model of the whole communication process as understood by relevance theory. It begins when a speaker makes an utterance. Remember, we said that's an under-encoded, ostensive stimulus from which he or she expects the hearer to infer meaning. And once they've made that utterance, the hearer starts that process of inference. The first inference is to try and decode the sounds into words and arrive at the logical form. Then, through enrichment, clarifying ambiguity, vagueness, ellipsis and reference, the hearer arrives at the propositional form of the utterance. Beyond this, he or she needs to understand correctly what kind of speech act it is. For example, is the speaker saying something, asking something, or telling them to do something? Once this has been sorted out, the hearer has arrived at the explicature. Beyond this, there may be one or more implicatures that are also being communicated, and the hearer needs to understand these in order to fully comprehend this meaning the speaker was intending to communicate. Further lessons are going to explore these aspects of communication. Maybe at this stage, though, you feel that communication is rather complicated. That's probably a good thing. But how can it be that we communicate so successfully most of the time? How do our minds work to figure this out? That's precisely the question that relevance theory seeks to address, and that's going to be the topic of our next set of lessons. However, before moving on to that, let's just take a moment to stop and think about the issue of enrichment and apply it to the sort of situations you're working in. Think about those processes of resolving ambiguity, vagueness, ellipsis, and reference. How might the issue of enrichment affect your future work? That might be very specific ways that it impacts it if you're working in linguistics or translation work. But it might also affect your day-to-day work communicating with colleagues, especially if they come from different varieties of the English-speaking world. Second, think about the role that culture plays in enrichment. How might the different cultural background of a speaker affect the way that they do enrichment? As well as culture, does language also play a role in enrichment? Can you give examples where the different languages people speak may play a role in the way that hearers do enrichment? Finally, can you think of examples from other languages where hearers might enrich an utterance differently from English hearers? Maybe you've seen an example of that in your own experience.